Morning. Good to see all of you on this Labor Day weekend. I hope you're not laboring too much. I've been getting a little rest from your labor. Hey, we're continuing our study of David. I want to welcome you to our family worship. About 2 or 3 times a year, we have all of our family together in the worship service. It's always fun. First service, it seemed like we were packed with kids. It made preaching very interesting, and it was a fun time. When I was in junior high, I was introduced to some new culture, kind of. Actually, it started when I was in the 5th grade. I had met a guy who was bused into the school where I was going, and he was tall and lean. And I was very, very short. I'm short now, but I was really short in the 5th and 6th grade. I may have weighed 37 pounds all wet, but I was going to be a basketball player. And so we were playing out on the blacktop, and I met a guy by the name of Melvin Johnson. Melvin's arms were taller than I was, and I thought, this dude may be able to become a basketball player. And so we played a lot of basketball, and our coach, even that early, taught us a simple screen, and where he would screen for me and then dash for the basket. And, all 4'3" of me, and he was probably 5'6" at that time or so. But we formed this camaraderie, and we went to junior high. And you got to realize that in those days, I had a crew cut. Skin on the side and a little butch wax up front. How many of you had crew cuts growing up? Okay, some of you're all older that had crew cuts. Some of you still have crew cuts going up. Okay, well, Melvin began blossoming out, and he began to grow an afro at that time. And his afro, sometimes he got called through for 3 seconds to the lane, and he was sitting on the bench. That was that big of an afro, huge afro. He could hide things in that afro. And he introduced me to a lot of different things that I didn't know about before, and things of that nature. So in junior high, when we had games, he would come over to my house, and he sometimes I would go over to his house at different times, and their food was a little different in their household than it was in my household, and his older sister called it soul food. Okay, and then he said he was over at my house one day, and my dad had the TV on, and we were watching the Porter Wagner show. Melvin was not too interested in the Porter Wagner show, and he was wondering if we could turn the channel and watch Soul Train. All right. How many of you remember Soul Train? May I see the hands? All right. How many of you actually watched Soul Train? Okay. Some of you did. Okay, good. So he introduced me to a whole new music genre, of things. And when I was in junior high, lots of words began to come out, like Soul Train and soul food. And then Melvin introduced me to the idea of being a soul brother. He said, you and I, we're soul brothers. And I said, so you go to church? What are you talking about, And so we had this good friendship that lasted throughout high school, and had great times playing with one another. But he gave this word. Now, we don't use the word soul brother anymore. Sometimes those of you who are married, sometimes if you've been married for as long as Tree and I have, you may start talking about becoming soulmates. It takes you about 45 years to become soulmates, really. And so that becomes introducing to your vocabulary. But today, there's another phrase that people use primarily on Facebook. It's this one. What does that stand for? Yell it out at me. Best friends forever. All right, so all these times on Facebook, there's somebody, they do these selfies together, click, and then BFF, hashtag BFF. And then I was introduced to a new one by my granddaughter that I'd not seen before, and it's this one. What's that stand for? Best friends for life. All right. The 6th graders know it. I didn't know it, all right? So this is what we were introduced to. So it was kind of the whole idea of saying, same thing as being a soul brother or soul sister, or these days it's besties, So I began looking for some quotes about besties and BFFs, and found a couple of good ones I want to share with you this morning. First one was this: as your BFF, I will always pick you up when you fall. After I quit laughing. I like that one, don't you? Yeah. And then this one's this one's probably more for adults, but it says, Friends are what God gives you to make up for your family. Can I get an amen on that? All right. Okay, so that's kind of where we hit on. I read another quote by a guy named Keith Manry, and he says this. He said, of all the things that cause me to stop and wonder, one of the questions that I have not been able to come up with answer to is why so many people are looking for meaningful friendships, and yet so few actually find them. It seems that everyone wants a friend, but few people have real friends. Maybe that's a situation in your life also. You want some real friends, real friendship. And no matter what age and stage you're in, whether you're in grade school or whether you are 80 or 90 years old, you still want to have friends. You want to have some people that you can have some meaningful conversations with, some people that you can share some things and you know that they're going to accept you no matter how bad that is that you're sharing with them, or when you go through some struggles in life, they're going to come up and put their arm around you, and whenever you're in a snit and moody, they're going to crack a joke and try to get you out of it, all right? All those things are symptoms of someone who is a best friend, a BFF, or soul brother within your life. Well, we're introduced in David's story to a guy who's the son of Saul. Saul is the king at this time, and if you remember, last time we were in David, Jim talked to us about David and Goliath. Well, David became friends right after he slew Goliath, right after he killed Goliath, with Saul's son Jonathan. As a matter of fact, 1 Samuel chapter 18, verse 21 says this. Verse 1, I'm sorry. Now, it came about that when David was finished reporting to Saul, now what he was reporting to Saul about was how the whole deal of him killing Goliath and slicing off his head and bringing it to the camp and carrying it around with him, those sorts of things. After he finished talking about that, Saul's son Jonathan looked at David and it says that the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David. They became soul brothers, all right? And Jonathan loved him as himself. There was something about David that connected Jonathan to him. There was, I don't know whether you've had this interesting thing or not. My friend Melvin and I, we were vastly different. There was a different shade of skin that we had, you know. He tried to teach me how to dance. He finally in high school gave up. He said, he often used words that I would not use to other people, but he said that you're just hopeless. You have no rhythm whatsoever. It's the reason your free throw shooting average is so bad, all right? And so just a constant deal, but there was something, though, about Melvin that attracted me to him. Part of it was his competitive drive. Part of it was the fact that he was passionate about the things that he did all the time we were growing up about certain things. And so there's something about David that Jonathan saw. Now let me take you back a little bit earlier in Jonathan's life. This event happens in 1 Samuel 14. If you're looking in your Bible sometime, want to read it. Jonathan and Saul, they are fighting. The Israelis are fighting against the Philistines. Again, if you remember, Goliath was a Philistine. And there was just, the Philistines had complete control over Israel, and Israel was always trying to break away from them. So the Philistines took away every bit of steel. They charged the Israelites for sharpening their farming tools and things of that nature, so that the only two pieces of armor for the entire Israeli army was Saul had an armor piece, a bow and an arrow, and a sword. And his son Jonathan also. That's it for the entire army. The rest of the army, I guess, just had clubs and sticks that they would take. Battle was a whole lot different during those days. And so they're encamped. The Philistines are one side of a pass, and the Israelis are on the other side of the pass. And there are two big cliffs that guarded the pass. And on the top of one of those cliffs was a garrison of the Philistine army. So one night, after Saul had told the entire army, stay bivouacked here. We are not going out to meet them yet. We're not prepared. We're not ready. And everything was, we're not ready. We're not ready. And for weeks, it went on like that. Jonathan grabbed his armor bearer. That's the guy that held the armor for the warrior. And he said, come on, we're going to go rout the Philistines, you and I. Well, the armor bearer said, "Are you crazy, dude?" No, that's not what he said. he actually said, "Whatever's on your mind, I'm with you, bro." They were soul brothers, you know. And so they go out, and David decides, if we can just climb to the top of this cliff, I think we can engage the Philistines. And he tells his armor bearer, if God is with us, we will rout the Philistines this day. He didn't say what would happen if God wasn't with them, but he has this adrenaline that he had and a passion for engaging things. So he climbs to the top of his cliff. The armor bearer comes with him, and God said to Jonathan, the Philistines are yours. And the armor bearer engaged them in battle and actually routed them. They took off running and fled the area. And so there's a major battle won. So when Jonathan sees David walk out on the battlefield with just a sling and 5 rocks in his pocket and kills the giant Goliath, Jonathan's going, this is my kind of dude. I like this guy. He's got some fire in his belly. I mean, I think I can be friends with him. And so their souls will begin to be knit together at that time. But their friendship continued to develop. There are other ways in which that friendship developed. One of the things that we see is that Jonathan was willing to make sacrifices for David. David, as we're going to see next week and the following weeks, he and Saul just became incompatible with each other. God had anointed David to be king. Saul was the king, and Saul was not going to cooperate with God at all. And so Jonathan sacrificed things to be able to protect David in this stage of when his dad was so mad at David all the time. And so what he did was he took off his armor. Remember, there was only 2 pieces of armor in all of Israel, and Saul had made David a commander over a battalion. But Jonathan took off his armor, his bow and arrows, and his sword, and gave them to David so that whenever he went out in battle, he could be protected and that he could lead the troops from a period of strength. That was a big sacrifice. There were times that Jonathan stood up for David whenever Saul was trying to kill him, and David helped him to escape several different times during this time. And I think it's interesting that David and Jonathan's relationship, Jonathan said he loved him like himself. And that just models one of the things that Jesus says. You remember? Jesus says the greatest commandment, number 1 top commandment is what? Love the Lord your God with what? All your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And then he said the second is like the first. Do you remember what it says? Love your neighbor how? As yourself. And Jonathan loved David as himself. There was a tight bond that came between them, partly because there was this connection that comes about because they had some of the same interests, and secondly because Jonathan and David were willing to sacrifice for one another. They would give up something. Real friends do that. They do what's best for one another. Sometimes that means sacrificing what others think of you to help your friend. Have you ever laid your reputation on your line for a friend? How many of you ever heard of a guy by the name of Jackie Robinson? Okay, great baseball player in the Baseball Hall of Fame. There was a movie that came out about 2 years ago called 42. It's a story of his coming into the major leagues. Jackie Robinson was the first black player to play Major League Baseball. And he was signed by the Brooklyn Dodgers to come play with them. And whenever he first started out, I mean, it was a tough road. Whenever in the minor leagues, whenever they would go into towns, he was not allowed to stay in the same hotel as the rest of the team was. There were people that on his team that didn't like him simply because he was an African American. They wouldn't have anything to do with him. So Jackie Robinson goes up to the big leagues, and whenever he came up, they played him at a position he had never played before, first base, because that's where they could fit him in. But unfortunately, at first base, he became a target. He was close to the stands, and the people in the stands would throw racial slur after racial slur after racial slur at him. Opposing managers and teams would just be yelling at him the entire game. Every time, that first year, every time Jackie Robinson came to the plate, whoever was pitching would throw at his head, trying to beat him. They would throw fastballs at his head. And he was diving out of the way over and over again. And finally, when that didn't seem to put him down, he kept going. When the runners would come down first base and Robinson playing first base, as he'd be stretching out to try to receive the throw, they would spike him. They would literally land on the back of his leg with their spikes to cut him up. And he was injured over and over again. One of his teammates, a guy by the name of Pee Wee Reese. How many of you have heard of Pee Wee Reese? All right, those of you who are older baseball fans. Short guy, played shortstop for the Brooklyn Dodgers for years and years, also is in the Baseball Hall of Fame. Well, Reese watched this week after week after week, and some of the players tried to get a petition saying that they wouldn't play if Robinson wasn't dismissed from the team. And Reese refused to sign the petition. He said he's a baseball player. That's all that matters. And he's a good baseball player. And so one game they were playing, I think it was in Cincinnati, Robinson was at first base. He had been dusted off every time he got the bat. He was feeling more and more discouraged. And at first base, a guy came and stepped on the back of his ankle, and he went down. And the stadium just began to boo and boo and boo him. And Reese called timeout from the shortstop position, walked across the field, put his arm around Jackie Robinson, and just stood there so that everybody in the stands could see that he, who was a southern white boy, was going over to a black man and putting his arm around him. I want you to see the film clip from the movie 42.
They can say all they want. We're just here to play ball.
It's just a bunch of crackpots still fighting the Civil War.
We'd have won that son of a gun if the cornstalks would have held out. We just ran out of ammunition.
Better luck next time, Pee Wee.
Ain't gonna be a next time, Jackie. All we got's right here. Thank you, Jackie.
What are you thanking me for?
I got family up there from Louisville. I need them to know. I need them to know who I am.
Hey, number one! You playing ball or socializing?
Playing ball, up.
Come on! Don't run is good to you!
Playing ball. Maybe tomorrow we'll all wear 42. That way they won't tell us apart.
That great clip. Jackie Robinson later would say that Pee Wee Reese was one of the most obnoxious people he had ever met in his life, but he was a friend. And he said after there were some more beanball incidences, Pee Wee Reese came up to him and said, "Jack, just got to tell you that some of these pitchers are mean SOBs." And he said, they're throwing at you just because you're black. And he said others of them, they're just throwing at you because they don't like you. And so Robinson looked at him and go, what are you talking about? And all of a sudden he just looked at him, and Reese was so serious, and Robinson just started laughing. And he said Reese would do this over and over. He'd make some wild joke or comment. And so Jackie Robinson said, I looked down at Reese and I said, "Pee Wee, they'd throw at you, but you're so small they can't find you." So humor, Robinson said, humor helped, Pee Wee Reese's humor helped me to go through some rough spots in life because he was my friend. Now, here's what I want to ask you about friendship, all right? All of us have friends. All of us would like to have more friends. All of us would like to have real friends. Sometimes real friends are few and far between. But the question is, are you trying to connect with people to be your friends? Are you just kind of waiting around for someone else to come up and put their arm around you? Or are you willing to make some sacrifices for someone so that friendship can deepen and develop? Are you willing to be open so that those things can happen? Jackie Robinson says, I was not open to anybody on the team, and Reese just kept after it and after it and after it and after it. And he was willing to make sacrifices so that they could be friends. And how's your humor quotient? I'll tell you, some of you are really hard to get along with because you have no sense of humor. Nervous Twitter, but it's true. You need to lighten up a little bit. And you need to realize that a sense of humor can carry through some very rough situations in life. Use it and use it well. Use it as a part of your tools to be able to develop deeper friendships. Listen to this sketch.
Sorry I'm late, man.
Oh, that's all right.
How we doing?
Good, good. How about you?
Oh, I'm good. How's Nancy?
Oh, she's good. This morning she's off on a garden walk with the girls.
Oh, wow. You've got a whole Saturday morning to yourself?
All day. You know, I think I'm going to start working on that basement again. How's Christine?
Oh, she's fine.
Oh, good, good. So what do you have planned for the day?
Well, I'm going to finally recaulk that window.
The one on the second story?
Yeah.
Huh. What's wrong?
You know, you sounded a little serious this morning when you called. I was wondering if there was a reason that you wanted to have breakfast.
You mean two guys can't get together and have breakfast anymore?
Well, no, it's just that you...
You mean two guys like us can't get together and have breakfast?
No, it's just that you sounded a little on edge.
Is there something that you need to tell me, Sam?
No.
Fine. Here.
Well, what? I don't get it.
I'm returning your drill bits.
Well, that doesn't make any sense. I know you're not through with them yet.
I don't need your drill bits anymore.
So what's wrong with my drill bits? Are they not sharp enough for you? What's the deal?
I've been thinking about buying my own.
Well, you're just talking crazy now.
I saw you.
What?
I saw you. I saw you in Stan's garage. I know what's going on.
Ron.
You borrowed his ladder.
Oh, Ron.
Don't try and deny it. I saw you. You walked into his garage, you all talked for a while, and then he helped you carry the ladder to your house. I'll tell you what, did you think you were going to get away with it? I mean, you're right across the street. I'm not blind. I'm trusting, but I'm not blind.
Ron, it was a one-time thing.
That's original.
You know, I had that pain to put in the window at the house. Yeah. I came to your house first, but you were gone. At 10 o'clock at night, Ron, you were gone. Where were you?
Well, I wasn't out borrowing someone else's ladder.
I was on my way home, and there was Stan in his garage. Ronnie was tinkering. I stopped. We talked. He was so understanding.
So that makes it all right?
You're right. I was weak, but he had what I needed.
And you couldn't have waited a day and called me? I thought we had something.
Ron, we do.
You don't know how this makes me feel. I mean, I have a perfectly good ladder in my garage. You've borrowed it before, and if I remember right, you liked it.
I did. I do.
And his is aluminum.
Yes, I know.
Mine is fiberglass. It won't conduct electricity, and it's a commercial grade ladder.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I didn't enjoy it. You know, his doesn't even have the little thing that you hang the paint can on.
Oh, that's pathetic.
Look, it was a one-time thing. It meant nothing to me. You've got to believe me.
I don't know that I can.
You know, this is so ironic. I was hoping we would get together this morning and we could talk about taking the next step together. I guess I've borrowed everything from your electric screwdriver to your ratchet set, but I feel like we've hit a wall.
Well, I mean, I've borrowed your weed trimmer.
Oh, please, that's a 3-amp electric. It's not even gas-powered. That's just trinkets. I really need more. Ron, I want to borrow your mower.
The Deere? The John Deere, my brand new mower?
Ron, I want to borrow your brand new John Deere riding mower.
Now you're just toying with me.
You don't believe me?
No, I don't.
If I could have y'all's attention, please. I would just like for you to know that I want to borrow this man's brand new John Deere riding lawnmower.
Sit down, you're embarrassing me.
I don't care. I don't care anymore, Ron.
My mower, I don't know what to say.
Say yes.
Well, my heart says yes, but my head makes me hesitate.
Ron, listen to your heart.
I don't know. I mean, I need to be sure. My mower, I've never lent it to anyone. I mean, I'll tell you what, tell me something. In 5 years, where do you see us?
Well, I don't know if you're ready for this, but Ron, I could see us recreating together.
Well, now, don't say that unless you mean it, mister.
Oh, I mean it. We could take our wives to the movies. Maybe a ball game, just you and I. Ron, we could play golf together.
Ooh, golf. That'd just be you and me with no distractions, just walking and talking. That could take 4 hours.
Sometimes longer.
Ooh, I'm getting a little lightheaded here.
Ron, I've had other friends. Look at me. But this is serious.
I'm going to have to think about this. I need to let this sink in a little bit.
Well, where are you going?
I can't eat right now. I'm going to go home and I'm going to tell Nancy about all of this, and I'm going to gas up that mower.
Well, then I guess I'll see you in about an hour, mister.
I'll be there.
Hey, don't forget these.
Earlier this week, I made a comment on our Boulevard family Facebook page. If you're not a part of that Facebook page, you need to be added to that Facebook page. Just go ahead and look it up and join it. Lots of craziness happens. So here's the question I posed. I said, hey, we have family service coming up this Sunday, talking about friendships. What are your favorite movie/TV show friendships? I then texted my wife and said, Jackie, do you think anybody will comment on this? Nearly 200 comments later, the answer was yes. People were very excited to talk about their favorite TV show and movie friendships. So my plan was to go through and to kind of see what people were saying and maybe tally, you know, these people won because they got the most votes or whatever. But it almost turned into a competition where people would start thinking of the most obscure references of any friends, of any TV show or any movie that's ever happened. A lot of times back in the day type movies, if you know what I'm saying. I had to actually meet with James and said, James, who is, read it off, and he would know who they were. Now, that's either saying that I'm not really connected, which is very possible, or you guys are old. One of those two things are true, and I'm not going to mention which one it may be. But here's what I decided to do. I decided to take, I appreciate your guys' opinions, but I wanted to make my top 5. So according to Jim, this will be my top 5 movie/TV show friendships. And they're really no particular order. Here's the first one. Lloyd and Harry, Dumb and Dumber. And here's what makes these guys good friends is even though they fought, even though it looks like things were really bleak and not going to work out for them, they came back together. You know why? Because they're friends. Next one is this. We have Scooby and Shaggy. Have to get, it's family service, children in here, had to throw some cartoon in there, you know. Yeah, absolutely. Scooby-Doo and Shaggy, you know, dog is a man's best friend. They solve crime together. They're both scared. They like to eat. That's a match made in heaven with friendships. Next one is this. Michael and Dwight from The Office. Yeah, absolutely. That deserves a round of applause, man. Big Office fan. And again, this friendship you could see is dysfunctional at the least, but they're still friends to the very end. And so that's what makes them a really good friend. No matter what Dwight tried to do to Michael or Michael did to Dwight, they always came back together because they were friends. Next one is this. Julius and Gary. Now this one, I was very disappointed. Yeah, absolutely. I was very disappointed in this one. Out of the 200 comments or whatever, nobody mentioned this friendship. This is from the movie Remember the Titans, my favorite movie of all time. They fought through so much together. At first they were enemies, and it was during a time when the racial tensions were really high, and they were on the same football team, the first white and black football team together. So they had to put aside their differences in order to come together, not just as a football team, but as a community. Very, very good movie. My favorite movie of all time. And hey, do yourself a favor. If you've never seen Remember the Titans, add it to your list. All right, make sure you add that to your list. But finally, the last one, of course, is going to have to be our boys, Woody and Buzz. You can't hear this song and not just be put in a good mood. You know what I'm saying? You're just right here. There it is. Because Woody and Buzz are best friends. At times, again, they were enemies, they were against each other, but in the end, they come together because they're friends. And there's this phrase that Buzz uses all the time. It's something I'm going to say a few times throughout this entire, or the last section of the message here. And it's this whole idea of to infinity and beyond. That was Buzz, and that was Buzz and Woody. You know, this morning there was actually this whole series we've been talking about David, and now we're this morning talking about friendship within our family service. And so we talk about his best friend, Jonathan. But what makes a friend a friend? What turns a normal friendly relationship into a blossoming friendship that transcends time and everything else? What makes friendship turn between something trivial and convenient into something that's to infinity and beyond? Now, whether it's my top 5 movie friendships or even in my own life, honestly, I'll tell you some things that my best of friends are not. This is not what brought us together. Similar interest. Believe it or not, my best of friends, we do not have, the most common interest. That's not really what binds us together. Is it kind of an attraction thing? Absolutely. But just because we're not into the same thing, that doesn't mean we can't be really good friends. Here's another thing that will not make my list of things that make a good friendship or will make sure that you're best friends with someone, is even lack of conflict. I know you guys out there, some of your best friends, you guys get into it. And it's because you guys have been around for so long or you're similar or whatever it may be, but you get into it. Out of all those movie characters, like it wouldn't really be a movie or a TV show if there were no conflict involved. But I think that's realistic. I think it's realistic to say that you don't have to be best friends with someone just because you do not fight at all. Here's what I believe holds friendship together no matter what. It's commitment, and it's loyalty. Not the kind of loyalty that says, I'll let you do whatever you want, and I'll say, hey, that's okay. But actually, the fact that I will be there for you no matter what. Just like in marriage, just like in love, commitment is a key to holding friendships together. So here's a question I'm going to pose at the beginning, and we'll come around at the end to answer, but I want you to be thinking about it. This question, how do I find a friend like Jonathan? How do I find a friend like David? Think about that question as we go through the text. Here's the text here in 1 Samuel chapter 20. Here's David's has already taken care of Goliath. And so here David and Jonathan, they're already friends that James has kind of already set up for us. But here David and Jonathan have a disagreement. And it's over a pretty big issue. Here's the issue. Is Saul, the current king of Israel, and Jonathan's dad? Here's the question. Is Saul trying to kill David? That's kind of a big agreement or a disagreement to have. You don't want to be on the wrong side of that answer. You know what I'm saying? So here there's this big disagreement, and you don't want to be wrong. So they devise this plan, David and Jonathan. They say, hey, let's find out if your dad really wants to kill me. Because David says he does, and Jonathan's like, no, he won't hurt you. He won't do anything to you. Don't worry about it. So they have this disagreement. So they devise this plan in which David, who would normally be sitting at the king's table, David was going to be gone for a few days. And so Jonathan was going to have to cover for him. And here's what they said. If Saul gets angry because I am not there, then he obviously wants to kill me. But if he kind of blows it off and says, don't worry about it, then I'll be okay. Then we're all good. But remember the key part of this narrative, and this is such an important part of the story, is Saul's son is Jonathan, which would naturally mean Jonathan would be the next king. Except David's in the picture. And so here these guys are friends, but honestly, they could be fighting over the next kingship. And so here's David and Jonathan being best friends when you would think naturally they should be rivals. So here's part of this narrative is that Jonathan's doing undercover work against his own family in order to look out for his friend David. Right? So before they break, though, before this plan gets set into motion, here's a text that you find from 1 Samuel chapter 20. It says this, so Jonathan made a solemn pact with David. May the Lord destroy all your enemies. And Jonathan made David reaffirm his vow of friendship again. For Jonathan loved David as he loved himself. Now, did you kind of catch this commitment language within here? Go ahead and keep that up for a second. I want you to look at this text and see the commitment, friendship language in the text. He says, Lord, may the Lord destroy all your enemies. Do you know who currently is David's enemy? It's Saul, his dad. Here's what Jonathan's saying. I'm so committed to you and committed to the Lord that even if my family is your enemy, I wish the Lord would destroy them. That's pretty big commitment. He goes on to say, talks about making this vow of friendship, an actual promise connected, that they would remain loyal and committed through a promise. And finally, like James mentioned, loved him as himself. Loved him as himself. That's commitment language through friendship. So they go on with their plan, and David misses this dinner. And the first night, everything's okay. Saul doesn't really mention it. Saul doesn't get upset, but David's just gone. Jonathan's thinking, I'm right. My dad wouldn't want to kill David. Of course he wouldn't want to do that. Second night comes rolling around, and Saul just loses it. And he actually asks Jonathan, where is your best friend David at? Tell me where he's at. And then Jonathan goes on to say, well, he actually left, and he's with his family, and they're spending some time together. And Saul doesn't like it. Saul gets ticked off. Saul does two extreme things in this moment. He actually throws a spear at his own son, Jonathan. You would assume he's attempting to take him out, attempting to kill him. Second intense thing he does is he drops the very first yo mama joke ever recorded in Scripture. Here's what he says. You are a son of a perverse and rebellious woman. Not sure what the mom had to do with all this, but it's in the text. It says, you bring shame to yourself and the woman who bore you. Saul's dropping your mama jokes. Things are getting serious up in the king's palace. Either way, Jonathan realizes, I'm on the wrong side of this argument. My dad does want to kill David. And so he's left with a decision to make. What do I do with this information that I have? Remember, if David's out of the picture, I'm the king. And I get to take over and do whatever I want to do. I'm the most powerful man in the world. I get to have all the women, all the wealth, all the power anyone could ever ask for. What do I do with this special information that David has no idea about? How committed is Jonathan really to this relationship? But you know the story. It's Jonathan and David. They're best friends. Jonathan is committed to David through thick and thin, no matter what. He goes on and tells David what happened. He tells him the truth. Even to his own detriment, he says, David, my father's trying to kill you. You do not need to come back. Don't come back. Because if he'll kill you, you won't be the next king. And I know that God has anointed you to be the next king. He tells him the truth. This is their last meeting together before David and Jonathan will part ways forever. And this is the last meeting that they have. And here's what the text tells us. It says, David bowed down 3 times to Jonathan with his face to the ground. Both of them were in tears as they embraced each other and said goodbye. The text says, especially David. Especially David was very distraught at the fact that this is the last time he's going to see his good friend Jonathan, who's been committed to him through it all, been loyal to him through it all. The text goes on to say this, at last, Jonathan said to David, go in peace, for we have sworn loyalty to each other in the Lord's name. The Lord is the witness of bond between us and our children forever, to infinity and beyond. We fast forward in the story, and now we're in 2 Samuel chapter 9. Jonathan is dead. Saul is dead. David is the king. And he can do whatever he wants to. He has this role, but he remembers this promise to Jonathan, his good friend Jonathan, that he would remain faithful, not just to Jonathan, but his family forever, to infinity and beyond, even though Jonathan is not alive on earth at this time. And so what happens is David goes and he's asking some people, he says, are there any more descendants of Saul around? Are there anybody that's family of my friend Jonathan? Now this is a dangerous question to ask back in that day, because here's how kingdoms worked, is if you would actually become the next king, the first thing kings would try to do is take out the original family, because they have the right to the kingship, and so if they have any kind of right, then maybe the people will side with them. So I have to make sure that you take everyone out. So when he asks this question, is there any family left of Saul? Other kings have asked the same exact question because they're ready to kill everybody. They're ready to take everybody out because this is my kingdom. It belongs to me and my family. Everyone say this name with me, Mephibosheth. Say it again, Mephibosheth. I got to think about it and pause because it is tough. That's the name of Jonathan's son. Mephibosheth. Now, people like to make fun of young people. They say they have weird names, stuff like that. Listen, Jonathan named his son Mephibosheth, so I think we're okay. But here's his son. He's the last remaining relative of Jonathan. It's actually Jonathan's son. And so here's this commitment that David has to Jonathan. He calls Mephibosheth in. Mephibosheth's probably pretty scared and afraid because, hey, he might kill me. It gives this detail that Mephibosheth has lame legs. He cannot walk. He's a crippled man. And so he poses no real threat. He thinks, this is the last of me. Goes on to say this in actually 2 Samuel chapter 9. Text says this. David responds to him, don't be afraid. I intend to show you kindness because of my promise to your father, Jonathan. I will give you all the property that once belonged to your grandfather Saul. See, he's taken what no power Mephibosheth has and actually given him power. It says, you will actually eat with me at the king's table. Mephibosheth responded this way. He bowed respectfully and he exclaimed, who is your servant that you should show kindness to a dead dog like me? Even Mephibosheth didn't think that David's thinking was very clear. It doesn't make any sense why you would show kindness to the son of a former king or grandson of a former king. Why would you ever show me kindness? But you know something that transcends reason and something that transcends time, no matter who's around, is your commitments. It's your promises. How does that hold true for you? We ask this question, how do you get this relationship? How do I find a Jonathan? How do I find a David in my life? And here's my answer. You don't. You don't just find a Jonathan. You don't just find a David. You don't go through your friends and say, they're not good enough, check them off the list, they're out. You don't go through an interview process to test somebody's commitment level to you and say, okay, you're worthy enough to be my Jonathan and to be my David. That's not how friendships are supposed to work. Here's what I think you can do. Instead of looking for the perfect friend that fits you, you become the perfect friend like Jonathan and David. You become so transparent. You become honest and committed and loyal to your friends. You'll be really surprised what God does through your relationships, through your friendships, when you stop waiting for somebody else to be committed and loyal and you become committed and loyal. See what God will do with that. Let's pray. God, we come to you now thankful for this opportunity to be here on stage at this church in order to talk about the relationship that you have awesomely blessed in Jonathan and David. God, we are so thankful that you have given this example of what it means to be a friend. God, I pray for our relationships that are out there, our relationships that we have with one another, that we'd be committed by more, Lord, than just what's convenient to us. Help us be committed to each other, to be a caring community of Christians, Lord, committed to each other, but committed to reaching the unchurched. Father, you are so grateful to us, or we're so thankful to you because of what you've done. It's in Jesus' name we can pray. Amen. Now, one of the things that the Bible talks about that I would feel like we were missing an element is a passage in John 15:13. And this is what Jesus says to his disciples right before he's about to be arrested. He already knows he's going to be killed. He knows his resurrection's happening. Here's what he says, that greater love, you could say greater commitment, has none other than this, that he laid down his life for his friends. See, in this passage, God is still God. God is still all Father and all powerful. He's still the Savior. But in this passage, God calls you friend. And here's what friends do with each other, is they remain committed to each other no matter what. How committed are you in your relationships with one another? And ultimately, how committed are you in your relationship with Jesus? We're going to take communion here at the end of our service, and that's just an opportunity that we have every single week that we take communion, is we want to remember the commitment that Christ made for you, because he called you friend. And as we talk about our commitments to one another and our commitments to your friends, please keep in mind and please know that Jesus was committed to you to the max first. How will we remain committed to him? Let's stand and sing this final song.